years ago in response to the increasing number of homeless people in our communities. And it was Mayor Tab and Commissioner Plottage at the time. So we're inheriting this, and Brett is actually pretty new to this, and I've been doing it for a year. The purpose of the committee was to explore the services needed to address the homeless population in the county. In particular, how do we reduce the camping on public lands and private properties? And secondly, how do we help the unsheltered people stabilize their lives? And so the membership of the committee, most of us are there, and it's on the slide. I'm gonna just ask us to introduce ourselves. John.
Yeah, I'm Don Green. I'm pastor of the First Christian Church, and I represent the Kittitas Valley Ministerial.
It's Willow. Ellsworth City Council.
Dave Sturgill, Kittitas County Homeless Housing Citizen Committee.
Good evening, Doug Bull, Kittitas County Health Network.
Susan Grindle, CEO, Hope Source.
John Raymond, I'm the CEO of Hope Source.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Delano Palmer. I'm also on the city council.
And you met me.
And I'm Brett Waxman, chair of the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee. I took that over the first of the year for Commissioner Chavez. So that's why I'm here.
Hey, good evening. I'm Ken Wade. I'm the chief of the Ellsworth Police Department. I'm Andy Pollock. I'm on the board of the Ellsworth Downtown Association, and I'm commissioner on that commission.
Hello, I'm Dan Carlson, Community Development Director for City Hall.
Good evening, Heidi Mr. Wayne, City Manager. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Jerry Weiner, I'm the Assistant City Manager in the city.
So we added a few city council people and business people when we went to the point of section. And there were a number of people who aren't here tonight representing the mental health and the sheriff's office and active in our committee. I just also want to say that this is a joint city-county effort because homelessness is county-wide. The Ministerial Association has provided a cold weather shelter for a number of years in churches and civic buildings from November to May. And it has been a burden on those volunteer efforts, and they will not be continuing. And in early 2023, this committee and the city and county agreed to pursue this sleep center idea. So that's kind of where we are. We've done some homework on the sleep center, what it might look like, how much it might cost, and then select a site. So,
So the format for this evening, you'll see a presentation from the committee. Then we'll have a Q&A. It sounds like there's going to be questions that are going to be collected as you came in. You should have been given a card. That'll be collected by the volunteers. There, you'll see info on, those are the cards. You'll see information on 8 potential sleep center sites. And then we'd like you to please share your comments and questions about the sites on the cards that were provided. Staff will compile the comments to provide back to the panel. Some of the most helpful comments you could provide are why do you support or why do you oppose a particular site? And if you have any additional information that we may not have on a particular site, it would also be helpful. And there's staff around the room to answer any questions. It's also a time, hopefully, that we can all learn and get some answers to our questions that have been circulating around town and on social media and everywhere else. We'd also welcome your opinions on those cards now, but there will also be a joint meeting between the Board of County Commissioners and Elmwood City Council on June 13th. So you can always provide written comments. If we do run out of time this evening, you can always email the Commissioner's Office or City Council. As you came in, you'll see in the back of the room, there's also additional tables with resources in the back of the room. Kelly is doing the man in white and showing you where they are. Appreciate that. So hopefully tonight's full of answers to your questions here. So thanks.
We do have a few other things up front for the folks in the back or looking for places that you want up. And so again, we're going to start to talk tonight, talking about the regulatory environment. Again, it's what we started this conversation on, but not where we're coming it from. So I'm going to have our city attorney.
Thanks, Andy. So the regulatory environment is created by some relatively recent case laws down from the federal on how cities, particularly in the Western United States, have to address the issue of homelessness. And some of these,
Yes.
some of these cases might be familiar with versus Martin, and also Johnson versus Grants Pass. So the first case was from 2017, and was actually cited finally until 2019. That's the case. And essentially, we have camping regulations that criminalize camping on that was challenged. So, most folks were cited, that ended up on appeal to the Ninth Circuit. So not restricted forces, but then the federal system. And what the decision basically said, it's a very long decision, but summary, it said, Boise could not impose criminal penalty if city, sleeping, or lying on public property for those who cannot obtain shelter. And so the way that that has been interpreted by most of the cities and counties and other local governments, if you don't have shelter space for homeless folks, you can't criminally make them and throw them in jail. So that decision has been around now for a good 5.5 years. Flash forward to 2022, actually 2020, in Grants Pass was a similar but not identical. It took a little bit of a twist and said that people could not have instruments basically sleeping in public on public property, sleeping bags and tents and stoves, fires, things like that. And that resulted in citations as well. Then was also challenged, same Circuit Court of Appeals, different judges initially hearing it. And they also struck down that in Grants Pass. The difference between them is that the Supreme Court of the United States was asked to review the decision to decline to do so. It did accept review for the Grants Pass decision. So they know that case was argued on April 22nd. And so we're awaiting the decision on that, which should be issued probably by June of the Supreme Court's term. So we don't know what that decision will be, but it's that we also have the state laws and regulations that also apply. So the challenge is on the U.S. Constitution. We haven't had a challenge to any laws under the national state constitution yet. I would anticipate that if the Supreme Court either strikes down or sends the case back to Grants Pass, we may see some challenges to under the state constitution. Our Supreme Court has long interpreted the state constitution to provide more vigorous protection for rights that are in the federal constitution. So we don't know what it would look like if there was a change there. We also have state laws that require the city, the county, and the city to plan for different types of housing. That would be transitional housing, permanent housing, as well as homeless shelters. And the county actually has, but the county has a continuing sort of 5-year plan to address those issues. Last plan was issued in 2017, and it's actually, I think, to be updated soon.
Terry, real quick, and everyone that's up here to turn off your mics except for Terry's. There's some audio issues online real quick, which are having, so there's a button on the top of your microphone for most of us. Switch to off position, so Terry's is the only one. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, and in my head,
I felt like these would work better.
yeah, for sure.
It's wrapped around that just. Well, below it.
All right, so. Very good. I won't break out into song. So, the county plan is due to be updated. And the county has to bring into that planning process the city of Benton County as part of that. So the state has recently issued some draft guidance on how those plans should proceed. And so it does require that those plans include planning for how to house homeless individuals within the counties and the cities. Likewise, the state has to have their own plan for that. So both the state has issued its draft guidance. It's also issued what's called draft guidance to cities. They should plan for this. And then one of the last elements as well is comprehensive plans. So we all are under the growth management act. And for the next iteration, those are updated periodically. This would be undergoing the city's comprehensive plan will be undergoing a big update in 2026. And that will also have to include new elements to address these other elements of housing, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and homeless shelter as well. And then, this is all to say that there's the regulation and whatever the Supreme Court will do, but I think regardless of the Supreme Court's decision in the grants pass case, this issue will not go away. And regardless of whether we have a shelter or not, we're going to have to address the issue as the KBMA started in 2015 to get homeless people out of the weather and out of parks and out of our business entryways and into shelters where they can hopefully get services. So that's what the regulatory.
Thank you. So we're going to take turns talking about pieces of the story, but I'm going to be the glue that's going to keep some of this together. So we are not the only community in Washington State or across the country that's having challenges with issues around people experiencing homelessness. The numbers across the country are going up. Different cities and communities are trying different things and having different success with things. The one thing that we know is that there's not one single cause of homelessness. There are correlations to housing affordability, but there are a lot of different pathways that get people into homelessness. And Hope Source put together a list of some of these, and that's what you see on screen. This is what we call an intractable problem or adaptive challenge. Some people call it a wicked problem. That it's something that there are many drivers to the cause, and that means generally there need to be different types of solutions to meet people where they're at and to also meet the needs of a community. So we're trying to take a systems approach, and that's what you see across the board here, people coming at the issue and trying to find where are the gaps and trying to figure out how we can actually create solutions. And so, and know that there's an economic cost to homelessness. And our chief can probably speak, and our EMS systems and our hospital systems and our jail systems can speak to, if folks don't have places to be, generally, they end up in some of those services, and those are pretty expensive services. And so that's also another driver for making sure that we're addressing folks and the needs in our community. So again, taking a systems approach to housing, and I will share these slides if you, will make sure to post these online, and just like we're doing with our comments and questions and things, we're gonna package those all together, so those should be up tomorrow. These slides should be up, so you're welcome to share those. And again, looking at a systems approach, we know that we need, and this group has been working on individually and collectively on solutions and making sure we're working with one another to make sure that we're filling the gaps. And what we know is emergency shelters is what we're talking about as a sleep center. That's only one of the elements in an entire system of sort of supports that we need to address the public health and safety issues and the humanitarian issues in the community. Great. So this is a slide that I stole from another community, and I did give credit to it. And I think this is, to me, when we're talking about systems and talking about really the progression or the spectrum of housing, people need different types of housing in different areas of their life and in different parts of their lives. And so, so a lot of folks, when we talk about from homelessness sort of a path to housing, not everyone is able to go directly to market rate housing. So thinking about the types of supports that people need in their communities in order for them to be successful. So we're going to have Pastor Don Green, talk a little bit about the Kittitas Valley Ministerial Association's.
Thank you. You know, 9 years ago, when we started the cold weather shelter, we didn't do it because the regulations told us that needed to be done. We weren't in the type of regulatory environment we're in now. The bottom line purpose for an overnight shelter, whether it's just a cold weather shelter like we've been doing the last 9 years, or the sleep center that we're talking about now, is to basically to give an answer to a fundamental question that every person experiencing homelessness is asking himself. And that is simply, where am I going to sleep tonight? What's tomorrow going to look like? Those are the questions that they're constantly asking. Knowing the answer to that question then frees that person to begin addressing the other present and pressing needs that they have. So they can begin to give attention to the things that have led to their homelessness. I don't know if you're aware, but nearly 60% of those that used the cold weather shelter last season had some form of disabling condition. About 25% of them never finished high school. And some of them suffer from some form of substance abuse, whether it's drugs or alcohol or both. And so they need answers to those issues. And if they don't have a place to sleep at night, they don't even work on them because they're always worried about where they're going to sleep. These kinds of conditions make it difficult for a person to find and to keep a job that pays them enough money to afford a place to live. So with the right assistance, along with consistent support and encouragement, mental support, physical and spiritual, these conditions then can be overcome, allowing people to become productive members of society. For the last 9 years, as I mentioned before, the Kittitas County Ministerial Association, they don't like saying all that, so we just call it KBMA. You see, KBMA, that's what we're talking about. And we've been operating an overnight shelter during the coldest winter months. We started mid-November and go through mid-March. And we do that so that those experiencing homelessness would have a warm and safe environment in which to sleep. So except for just 2 different seasons, the shelter has been hosted by groups of churches, 7 different churches. Each church has a night of the week. And so those who need to stay there have to remember which night is being hosted by which church, and they have to get to those different locations. And these different churches graciously open their buildings as a place for these folks to sleep. Unfortunately, it has become an attempt to continue this model, let alone expand it to a full year-round sheltering experience. Now, I'm just going to say this right up front. Steve Luton, who's the pastor over at Foursquare Church, he's the one in the KBMA for the last few years, couple of years, has been sort of overseeing what we've been doing. And so, but neither he nor I were at our KBMA meeting. And at that meeting, they decided to vote not to do the cold weather shelter again. So the KBMA won't be doing it as the organization, even this coming fall. So we're busy hunting to find other ways to make that shelter happen. And it's just become harder and harder to get volunteers. There are scheduling conflicts with a lot of the churches that were volunteering. The model is to meet the needs of all the homeless. Things like people can't sleep in a congregate setting, because everybody's meeting in one room on mats in the sleeping bag, and there could be 15 people on the floor in the same room. There are many who can't sleep with all the snoring that goes on. How many of you could sleep in a room of 15 people with half of them were snoring? And some of them just can't be comfortable in that close in contact with a whole bunch of other people. It's just becoming untenable. It doesn't meet the needs of all of those. So it's important for us to find another workable solution for this homeless population to sleep. So the overnight sleep center that we've been talking about now for the last couple of years is just that. It is simply a place for those folks to sleep for the night and to prepare themselves to meet the challenges of the next day. It's not designed to be a home where people will come and live for the rest of their lives. In fact, we don't even want it to be very inviting. We don't want people to stick around. We want it to be safe and efficient, but we want to be able to move them along into other forms of more permanent housing. Those that want to use the service, they need to get there every evening and check in. And it's not a 24-hour shelter, so there's no reason for any of them to linger after checkout in the morning. They'll come at night, they'll check in, they'll leave in the morning. There's nothing for them there for the rest of the day. They will go on into the rest of the community as they do now, every day. Blend in as best they can. They'll be screened to be sure that they're not a danger to others, including the staff at the center. After being screened, they also won't be free to come and go. So when they get there at 6 o'clock or so, that's when it opens, then they'll be screened. And if they leave the shelter, they can't even come back in again. So they don't come and go. They get there, they stay. And then in the morning, they leave. Once they're in the center, they'll only be allowed to keep a few of their personal belongings. This is how we were in the cold weather shelter. The sleep center will be very similar. They keep some of their possessions with them, their toothbrush, cell phone, a book, those kinds of personal things. The rest of their belongings, which they always carry with them, they're going to be securely stored on site. They won't have access to that until they leave the next morning. So when they check out in the morning, they get all their stuff back, so they have it during the day. But they don't have access to all of those things while they're there at the shelter all night long. Then during the center hours, which I don't know, they could be from 6 at night till 8 o'clock in the morning, something similar to that. Social service organizations will easily be able to know where they are so that they can then work with them, set appointments to meet them in their offices, do various things, so they can begin to work on the types of issues that they need to work on so that they won't be homeless on an ongoing basis. This past cold weather season, 89% of those that we served were residents of Kittitas County. So only about 5% were actually from the west side. The overnight center will primarily be a way of helping our own county residents by giving them a hand up and an opportunity to put their life back together. That's what my motivation has been, and so many of us that have been volunteering for the cold weather shelter, and that's a lot of what's motivating a sleep center in addition to some of the regulatory things that have come up over the last few months and in the last couple of years. So, thank you.
Thank you, Don. Oops, wrong direction here. So this is a slide that talks a little bit about the Housing and Urban Development HUD, which is a federal agency, actually categorizes homelessness. And they require communities to do what's called a point-in-time census every year. So the same day every January, communities go out. Hope Source generally heads this up, and there's a bunch of volunteers that count. We do a census of folks experiencing homelessness in the community. The numbers have risen over time. There's a pretty stark increase over this last year. And so again, this is not unique to Ellensburg. This is a trend that we see happening really nationwide. And so one of the things to note is that even the definitions are very specific, and the folks who are living in their cars are also considered sheltered. So when you're looking at the numbers, just know that there's some caveats that's in the counts. And so again, a very formal process to do those counts. Great. So Don, and thank you, Pastor Don, for talking a little bit about the sleep center and how we came up with that idea. And so again, there's the regulatory environment that requires us to have a place for people to sleep in order to regulate our new camping ordinances and things like that. And then we have other conditions that we have across our community. And the shelter model that we came up with was actually modeled after a number of other communities. And some folks are very familiar with the Moses Lake model. And our ad hoc committee went in April of 2022 to visit that site and talked with the police chief at the time, talked with the city council members and some city staff as well, and learned about that model. Having those individual shelters was a much better type of setting for people, had better access and actually had more success with services. And so I know folks, some folks are familiar with the housing first model when you think about Maslow's hierarchy, about the basic needs that in order to help somebody sort of move out and address some more chronic challenges, typically shelter is one of those basic needs to meet. And so oftentimes if you're meeting the housing need at minimum, you're providing a basic level of safety so people can access their services and do that. And so, so I would actually like to invite Brittany and from Hopes back here to talk a little bit about the Hope Source model. Thanks so much.
You guys hear me?
Pull it out, pull it out.
First of all, thank you guys all for coming up. I mean, no matter which. Hold it up. Oops, there. Can you hear me now? No matter which side of the coin you fall in, take an opportunity to come out tonight and learn about the Sleep Center and learn about what we're trying to do here is really commendable. So thank you guys for coming and showing your support and interest in the topic. So my name is Brittany Before. I oversee our shelter and our community housing programs. One of those programs is the Open Doors Sleep Center in Moses Lake. That's what I'm going to talk about. Like I mentioned, the city and city council members and county commissioners and a few other community members came out a couple of years ago to check out what we were doing in Moses Lake, and they liked some of it and wanted to be able to duplicate that here in the community. So the people that we serve in the Sleep Center in Moses Lake are predominantly from Moses Lake. 86% of the people using the shelter are from Moses Lake, and actually 92% from Grant County. Almost everyone that uses the Sleep Center is from the community. Less than half report having SUD concerns, substance use disorder. So I think that there's a common misconception that everyone who is homeless is addicted to drugs or alcohol, and that's very much not the case. I think a lot of us are few paychecks, state of emergency away from being homeless ourselves, and I think it's really important to kind of keep that in mind when we're talking about people that we're serving. And over half of them have disabilities. So for a lot of people, getting a job or gainful employment is not an option. Less than half have a high school diploma or GED. So I think that's also something to keep in mind, is that we live in an expensive world right now. And so there's not another option for a lot of people that are using it. I think most of our guests at the Sleep Center would prefer to sleep in a house and sleep in a warm bed rather than in a shed. But it's a safe place to sleep, and that's exactly what we do at the Sleep Center. We give people an opportunity to access resources. We have community members that come in twice a week. Someone from our office comes in and offers case management services, works with active clients. We have a volunteer in the community. She comes once a month and cuts people's hair. We've got lots of donations of food and things like that. As well as having work source comes in, our SUD provider in Grant County comes in on a weekly basis. So all that to say, having the chronically homeless population in one place, being able to track them, being able to engage with them regularly has really had a big impact on our I was sharing an anecdote with Susan the other day, is when I first joined and took over the Sleep Center, we started doing community meetings. There was a lot of mistrust of the system and accessing resources. And I think being able to engage with the guests at the Sleep Center regularly has really impacted that. We've seen a really great success rate. Actually, more than 90% of people that are exiting the Sleep Center exit to permanent housing. So if you're coming, yeah, I really love that. But the caveat with that is that they have been enrolled in the program an average of just over a year. And so that takes time. There is mistrust in the system. It takes time. We don't see results right away. We have seen since inception that we've had a really great success. And for some people, they've been there since day one, and that's what they're looking for. Safe place to sleep, a safe place to store their belongings, and that's kind of where the engagement ends, and that's the purpose, right? Is that they have a safe place to sleep. You guys have been outside, even today, it's May and it's freezing. We want to be sleeping outside tonight. So operations, I think kind of talked about it a little bit already, so I won't beat a dead horse. But we open at 6 p.m. and can start lining up at 5:30. You cannot be on property before 5:30. We do intakes from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. Come in any time between those hours. If you come beyond that time, you must be escorted by Mosaic PD or Sheriff's Department or EMTs. So if there's an emergency and that's why you weren't able to get there in time, we're still gonna open the doors to you, but we should be there by 10. We exit at 8. So we do our first wake up call around 6:30. People can come get up and get moving. A lot of times we will schedule appointments with case managers or other resources, and they can stay. From 8 to 9, we call that resource hours. So people that don't utilize the Sleep Center but still need food or access to resources or information, they can come in between 8 and 9, access that. I'm not a public speaker. There's a lot of you here, so please excuse my shaky voice. The storage of personal belongings, they actually do have access to it at all times during the evening. They basically, the city of Moses Lake, offered new garbage, biggest garbage bins that they have, basically similar to what you guys get picked up weekly at Waste Management here. They have a lock on them. Every day when they exit, their tote has to be lined up in its spot with a lock on it. The lock has to fit, so we don't allow an overflowing tote. During the evening and during operating hours, they can free up their belongings, and then they have a safe place to keep it. What that means for the community is that people are not carrying all their belongings with them around town. I think another great thing that we've seen at the Sleep Center is that we have disposed of over 80 tons in the last year at the Sleep Center. It gives people a place that they can dispose of things. It is safe, on the side of the room. We also enforce our rule. We have a violation process for what we call minor violations, that would be like overflowing tow, late exits, staying on property, not complying with, I don't know, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Super minor violations, you get 3 warnings. On the 4th warning, that would be 24 hours. If you get 3 more warnings, it escalates to 42, 72, and so on. Generally, after someone spends a night or 2 outside, they don't have a problem falling up again. And I think it's worked well for us. We don't have people staying often in the morning. The bus comes at 8:02, another one comes at 8:06. And not many people want to miss the 8:06 bus, because that means they're walking to the library or the park, wherever they're spending their day. So it's not often that we have people loiter around. Same with in the evening. There's very rarely anyone there before 5:30. Again, it would be a violation. You get 3 violations, you're spending a night outside. What do we mean by low barrier? So I think that this is something that's really important, A, for compliance with the regulatory conditions, but also in making sure that we are giving everyone an opportunity to have a safe place to sleep. Is we don't verify that you're homeless, we don't verify what your income is. If you come to us and you need a place to sleep, and you're able to care for yourself, we have a space for you. It's not often that we're full. Surprisingly, it's in the summertime that the sleep center gets really full. I would think it'd be in the winter, but it's very rare that we have to turn people away. That's what we mean by low barriers. If you need a place to sleep and you can get to the sleep center on time, you've got a place to sleep tonight. And then kind of the adjacent property. So we are right on State Route 17. So we get lots of trash accumulating on the perimeter, on the fence line, and our guests are really great. Once a week, we pass out garbage bags and we do a sweep of the perimeter. I think you could probably go to the sleep center today and it looks pretty much like this every day. Guests take really good care of it. If you were driving by, you'd probably think it was a hickory shed sale lot, not a sleep center. So I'm really impressed with the guests, but yes, we do have some trash accumulated alongside. There's also a fairly large homeless encampment on an adjacent property. It's been there for 10 years, so the community or the landowner lets the guests use the property, and because it is private, it's private land, there's nothing that the city or county can really do to clean that up. And so yeah, we live with it, and we've done outreach there for the last 8 years. We encourage people to come and use the sleep center. Actually, not all of them do, but again, that kind of creates some trash accumulation around the sleep center. What else are we missing? And having for a success rate. So I think that Heidi touched on this, but I think it's really important to think about, because if you really want to get up and feel good about yourself in the morning and go to work and get out and get a job, you probably want a shower. You probably want a good place, a nice place to sleep. You need your documents. If you have all your things in that get stolen, how are you going to get an ID? You don't have a birth certificate, wallet. Having a safe place to sleep is the foundation for self-sufficiency. It's a foundation for moving forward in your life. That's why housing first is so important. That's all I have. Thank you.
And Brittany will be here. Hope Source has a table at the back of the room, so if you have other questions, feel free to stop by and talk with her and some other Hope Source folks as well. So
I just want to say one more thing. Yeah, if you guys have questions, my door is open. Give me Hope Source a call. It's 925-1448. Ask for me. I'm super happy to show anyone around the sleep center, talk about the services that we have here in the county and elsewhere.
thank you. So as Pastor John talked about and Brittany talked about, we've been talking about a sleep center, and the shelters are important. So we were in the process of looking at different models. Moses Lake used sort of the tough shed or hickory shed shelters. There's another company out there that does that sort of modular shelters and has easy setup, which is one of the options that we've explored. And again, just the importance of having individual spaces. Congregate settings tend to be less inclusive and tend to keep a number of folks who likely really truly need that shelter out. Great. So I want to talk just briefly about it, and Brittany talked about this. Having a low barrier shelter doesn't mean no rules in place. And so the operating framework of a shelter is incredibly important. And what we also found is some communities have set up different types of rules in order to make sure their shelter is operating properly and protecting the community around it. So I'm not going to go through this in detail. I think Pastor Don actually addressed a lot of the issues we've been talking about and the importance of having good operational procedures and set up for a sleep center. One of the challenges is mitigating impacts. And so the city council and the county commissioners actually in July of 2022 both voted to move forward with the concept of a sleep center. And so there's been a lot of work trying to figure out where this is. We actually hosted an open house in March of 2023 to talk about the sleep center, but we didn't have a location. And we knew one of the challenges would be when we started talking about locations, people would say, that's great, but not here. And so this is a really challenging thing to cite. We don't have people showing up and saying, please put this next door to me, because there's a lot of concerns about some of the challenges that a sleep center might bring to a neighborhood or a community. So communities have actually created some rules around this. We've actually talked to a number of communities. The city of Vancouver, for instance, has a rule that they don't allow camping on private property within, I think it's 1,000 feet. And so it's one way that they found to mitigate people that are setting up campsites outside the managed area. And so others have done standing and loitering. So there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of mitigate the impacts. So the city actually owns a transit system. And so redirecting transit or making sure that we have appropriate transit stops, similar to what Moses Lake was doing, to make sure we can get people to and from areas to kind of help managing the schedules around how the sleep center is operated. So a lot can be done to mitigate the health and safety of the surrounding community and the impacts of the surrounding community as well. All right. And we call this the magnet theory. I think that one of the biggest fears is if you build it, they will come. And the concerns that folks say is, people are going to come here in droves and across the mountains to Ellensburg. And, other communities are not finding that same trend, and other communities are finding the same trend of about the same number of people from that community and from that county are the ones who really are the ones who are using the services in their own communities. And so, and again, we have a wonderful place here, but it's not incredibly inviting for much of the year to be sleeping outdoors. So some of the work that's gone into doing a site analysis is after the city and county, the city council and the county commissioners had voted to move forward with the sleep center, this committee and then also our city staff and county staff went through a property inventory. We knew that if we had a public piece of property, that would probably be the easiest to site and build on. We went through an exhaustive process, meeting with the fire marshal and the building folks and looking at all of the options we had. And we came up empty. There wasn't a premium site. We agreed to work together to find a site in the city limits or at minimum in the urban growth area. Because again, we're going to need water and sewer to a site, and it has to be in the city limits or urban growth area to do that. So we quickly realized we needed some assistance. We knew if we were going to need to go outside of our own public entities, essentially, we were going to need some help. Typically, public, as when we start doing land transactions, when somebody says the city is looking for a piece of property, guess what happens to the price of that property? It goes way up. And so typically that's not how we do site selections and site work. So we actually hired, the city and the county together, hired Echo Northwest, they're a consulting firm, to help us look at sites. And we went through the commercial inventories, we went through private inventories. We were looking for a site that would be suitable, and we're looking for some of the criteria. We also knew that we needed to fund this. None of us have money sitting around in bank accounts that that we have to spend on this. There's all kinds of competing needs in our communities, and we need to be very smart about how we use our resources. So we needed to know how much this was going to cost to looking at other communities and looking at the cost of land, of site development, of purchasing shelters, and then of operating that, because it doesn't stop there. So Echo Northwest helped us put together some numbers, and that's all published on our website and very available. We ended up landing on the Nights Inn Motel, and so the situation changed with Hope Source, and so in March of this year, we actually brought an agreement with the city and Hope Source to look at the site they call the Pathways site, and at 1200 Ruby Street. That was through a lot of exhaustive work, and that's where we landed. The county council at the time said, we want more process. People didn't really understand how we got to this. And so what we did is we opened up essentially a crowdsourcing opportunity for people to designate or to nominate places that we should look at. And so we had about 40 suggestions. And so we had a form open for about 5-6 weeks, had about 40 suggestions. And then we, some of those were multiple suggestions for the same properties. And we did a site analysis. And so this committee that was expanded, and on April 19th, we met to review those specific sites. And we actually have an interactive map on the website that shows those coded in red, yellow, and green, essentially. And the red sites were not feasible. The yellow were potentially, and the green ones were the most feasible. So some of the criteria we looked at, and I'm going to go through this very quickly, is that we talked about it needs to be in the city limits or at least in the urban growth area. I'm going to go through these one by one here. And one of the reasons is, again, for site development. The county doesn't have a code that talks about how to build emergency shelters. The city does. And we have the ability to work together in the urban growth area. We talked about being, something needs to be available. You heard from Pastor Don that, we need to, at an emergency basis, make sure we have a place, cold weather shelter save lives. And we know that we're going to need something for the cold weather this fall. So whether that's a temporary or if we can find a more permanent site for a sleep center, that will be. So we're working diligently on that as well. But the site needed to be available, not 5 years down the road, not 2 years down the road. We know we have a short-term need. In the process, again, the state provided new requirements for counties on zoning. So our city actually adopted code for transitional housing and emergency housing and emergency shelters. And we actually have some special requirements when it comes to emergency shelters. And that means we have to come up with an operational plan. So it can't be, well, this site is just zoned appropriately and we can move forward. We actually have to designate what the operation is going to be at the site and have a good plan in order to address the needs and concerns of the site. So site safety and operations as well. So that's part of our regulatory process for city rules. And we are looking for a site, some people have argued about, 1.25 acres is not, but we also need to know, we need the ability, if necessary, to expand. We're talking about starting with 25 shelters, according to the needs and the numbers that we see. We think that's adequate for a period of time. This is again a city and county, and so that's where we're starting, and that does include an intake building and a place for folks to do showers. And so there are fire codes too that require a little bit of separation. So and fencing, and so the 1 acre, really the 1.25 acres is our target site area. And again, we need to be cognizant of what the adjacent uses are. And it needs to be accessible. Multitude of options. As I mentioned, funding is the big question. The city and county both have lots of money for some capital, but this is going to be, again, this is something very different than the community has ever done before. And one of the requirements, we know that there are some state and federal dollars out there to help us, especially with capital costs for development. But the one requirement is we need to know an address. We need to have a site before we can move forward with trying to get some funding to help us stand up this service for our community. All right. And again, the affordability, the cost of property, as you're going to see Dan's in here in a moment, is going to go through the 8 sites and talk to you a little bit about some of the sites and why they are more favorable. All right, and we'll talk a little bit about the site development. Again, if you've ever built a building, Ellensburg is pretty flat. We have lots of floodways and floodplains and things like that, and that actually complicates development. So I'm going to have Dan take it away with our 8 sites.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go through an overview of these 8 sites, but I'm not going to discuss all the criteria for each one of the sites. In other words, if it is zoning, if it will be a permitted use in the zone, we won't mention it here. There are posters around the back, the information for the sites, the criteria. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, is that better? Okay, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do for the overview here is just to focus on challenges associated with each site. And then as far as those criteria go, and then also what the costs are of improving this. So this first site is on Highway 97. It is a 7-acre parcel. You can see in that picture on the left, the lower portion of that, that's University Auto Center. Up to the north of this property is Ellensburg Cement Products. The picture on the right is taken from about that southeast north on that property. As far as challenges go for this, access on the property is about 3 miles from downtown and about a half mile away from the nearest transit stop. The sale and lease terms is another challenge for this. We are aware that this property had previously been advertised, a portion of it had been advertised for lease, but we were unable to contact the property owners, so we do not know the status of lease of this property. Or the utility and site development considerations, these are, for most of these, only talking about image improvements, extension of utilities, and access to the site. They're not talking about any actual development of the property. There's one exception, as we go through the site, but most of them are just talking about that frontage improvement, utilities, and to the site. So for this one, power is not currently available to the site, but this is the area of the future county transfer station, which will bring power to the area. And then water and sewer is available in Highway 97, and with the frontage improvements and the utilities, the estimated improvement cost for this site is $982,005. The next site is in that same area. This is off of Green Avenue. It is a 15-acre parcel. Again, you can still see University Auto Center there in the portion of that picture. The property to the north of this is the future site of the county's transfer station. This property, as far as challenges go, it's an access with another same area, it's the same kind of issue. It's about 3 miles away. Mile to the nearest transit stop. This property is currently for sale, the 15-acre parcel for $2.25 million. Again, power is not currently available. Water and sewer is available from Green Avenue. And frontage improvements would be required for this site all along Green Avenue. So you can see that lower picture. The right side of that is to the north of the site. The left side of that is the site of frontage improvements will be required along there. Total estimated improvement costs of $608,000. So the next one is Berry Road and Canyon Road. This is a 16.9 acre parcel that is it's actually in the county jurisdiction. Looking at the top picture there, if you just to the left of the site, off screen is the city's wastewater treatment facility. To the north is the buzz in, the truck stop. This property is, as far as challenges go, again, this is not in the city. It could be annexed and it could be annexed into a zoning designation where this use would be allowed. The challenge with that is that there is a delay associated with that. Look at it about a 4 to 6 process. It includes public hearings and public notice. Another access is, or another challenge is access. The property is about 2 miles from downtown. The nearest transit stop is about a mile away. And this property is available for sale. It was listed in 2023 for $2.1 million. The frontage improvement would be required all along Berry Road and Canyon Road, those frontages along there. And so with that and the other estimated cost for improvements is $57 million. So next property is a 52-acre parcel that's owned by Central Washington University. It's at the intersection of Helena and Sycamore. You can see Helena's at the top of the picture there, and Sycamore is that intersection to the right. It's property the university is looking at possibly buying. There could be a 5-acre parcel available for this use. Challenges, the sale terms and costs are unknown at this time. There are critical areas associated with this property. Wilson Creek is along the western edge. There are some wetland characteristics, so there would be a critical area review that would be needed for that. And then I think the biggest challenge for this is would be that the subdivision of this property would require Helena to be extended across the full length of this property to the east, and then Sycamore to be extended through the property all the way down to 18. So with those improvements, the total estimated improvement cost would be $3 million. This property is at the end of West Wilma Avenue. It is just for orientation, the parking lot that you see the upper left of that picture is Goodwill. Building just to the east of this is the auto spot. This property is 2/10 of an acre. As far as challenges go, the site is for sale, but it has an option on this property. The total of the subject property, this is I think the biggest challenge with this one is the total is 2/10 of an acre, which could only accommodate 10 units in this layout. So the orange boxes that you see on there, I was going to mention that last slide. We did kind of mock those up, what a sleep center site would look like and what the necessary spacing and do it at scale so we could into these parcels. So this you can see we could only get 10 of the sleep shelters in onto this. The property is also within a 100-year floodplain. It's an AO zone, so the property would have to be brought in to bring the property to 2 feet above the highest adjacent grade is on here. And I think I have another 1 or 2 properties that have the same kind of floodplain. Part of developing in the floodplain is if you're going to place that fill, you have to excavate the same amount on the same site and connect it to that same or potential flooding. Compensatory storage is what it's called. So this site, just isn't large enough for use and compensatory storage. And then total utilities and site development cost of $203,000. So this property is at 701 Main. This is a 1.3 acre parcel. We'll see to the south is Kittitas Medical Supply. To the east and across Main is Rite Aid, and then to the north is Home and Ranch. As far as challenges go for this, one is the concerns of the nearby uses. We have heard concerns from our engine home. The majority of the site is in the 100-year floodplain, which, again, would require those sites. This project, you can see, we laid it to 25 shelters, and this does appear like there is to do the compensatory storage that would be necessary on that site. But it would require. And then the site, as far as utilities and site development, the site does require a sewer line extension. Water and electric are available on the site. And for this one, oh, this is the exception. This is the one where we did include the estimate bill, the compensatory storage, just to be able to demonstrate that. Of the 326, well, it's actually about 333,000 is what the estimate for this is, and about 1,000 of that for the fill and the compensatory storage. Just to give you an idea of what the costs are. And then this is the Foursquare Church on Mountain View. Surrounding uses include Pacifica Senior Living and Vista Senior Living, with adult living and some private residential uses. As far as challenges go, this is one where zoning, could represent. It's in the zoning district, residential suburban zoning district. The emergency shelter is a conditional use permit, so meaning it would take a public hearing for our hearing examiner. There would be a process that would probably take 6 months. The another challenge is the sale and lease terms. The terms aren't known yet. The church pastor has indicated an interest, but this would still be to the church board for approval and for those lease terms. And I guess just want to point out, we dropped those 25 shelters onto that photo that you see in the photo, so you can see is kind of how much of that site would be taken. And then total improvement costs for this site, $408,000. And then the last site, this is the Pathway site, 1200 South Ruby. This has Golden Dragon to the south, Les Schwab is kind of to the west and the north. Happy Feet Academy also to the north. One of the challenges on this, we have concerns both from Happy Feet and from Les Schwab regarding this location. Critical areas. And the top picture that you see shows the extent of the floodplain on this property. So you see just that blue is there. Property also has Wilson Creek on the east side of it and some wetlands there as well. So there is a need for critical area review. The creek has an 85-foot buffer from it. The wetlands, we need to actually get somebody on site to type those to see what type of wetland it is and what that buffer is. So there is a critical area component to the site. And then as far as utilities and site development, utilities would be needed to extend across to the potential site, and that's estimated at $364,000.
So we're going to invite Susan from Hope Source to talk a little bit about the site and about the future and timelines for the Pathway site. Again, this is at 12.
Good evening, and thank you very much for coming and listening and educating yourself about what is happening. I'm Susan Grindle, CEO of Hope Source. In 2022, Hope Source had the opportunity from a private seller to secure the Knights Inn building and the 4 acres that are behind it. And we intended to take the Knights Inn and convert it from motel rooms to 1 bedroom. From 32 to 16 units, 16 1-bedrooms, for affordable housing for families. And then we intended to take and to continue to add to affordable housing, which is one of our charges, is to get more units on the ground that people can afford. So behind the Knights Inn, the plan was to put up about 50 units of affordable housing with training facilities on site. So we didn't rush to offer this during the discussions for season. Now that sounds odd because that's our mission, isn't it? But as it went along, it was clear to us that that is our mission. That's what we have done since 1967, is to try and offer more and more options to people who have fallen into homelessness at some point in their life. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. That's what we'll continue to do. And so we talked with the city and we said we would offer the far east portion of that property where you saw the floodplain, but not quite to the blue. And it would do a couple of things. It would not disrupt our ability to build 51 units. And it would add a critical step to helping us put people on a new path. To give them a hand up, not a hand out, but give them a hand up to change their lives and to thrive. We do that through something called the pathway to permanence. The pathway to permanence starts with a shelter. Hopefully in this county, it will start there, because that's a critical first step to the pathway to permanent people. The next step would be transitional housing, and then affordable housing, and then market rent housing, and some people go on and work with Habitat to own houses. That's the pathway to permanence, getting people stabilized in the first place so that they can think about what a future might look like and can begin working toward. With our case managers, we case manage and offer services and work with all the local providers for all the supports that are needed, that covers mental health, physical health, food, transit, everything. So that's the piece. When we finally looked at it, that's the final piece that was missing, was a sleep center, a night-by-night sleep center that could let them stabilize, let them begin to build relationships. We talked about that. That's key. Building relationships so that they trusted us, so that they would enter our programs, they would take advantage of different services to help themselves, and then move on to different kinds of housing and along the path. Now, we knew full well when we said, you know, that is our mission, we need to do that. Since 1967, we have heard all of the myths, of the rumors, of the incorrect information, of uninformed opinions. We've heard it all. When we build, whether we are talking about a sleep center, whether we're talking about putting up more units for our community to live in. So we're used to it. We know that that's not all the information. And there are wonderful resources out there for all of you to take advantage of. Brittany offered one. She was serious. Come into the depot, talk to some people who are doing that work. But there are a lot of resources that are easy to find, and we would be happy to point you to them about how this system works and how it works if it's done, and why a sleep center is the first key piece to getting your neighbors housed again, to getting your neighbors on their feet again. Because remember, a lot of people have talked about between 80 and 90% of the people are grandmothers and grandfathers of somebody in the community, mothers, fathers, their children, aunts, uncles. They all live here, they're part of us. And so this serves to get them back into the mainstream, get them back into having a life that we all want. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We do have resources on our website, and as I mentioned, we're gonna post this. And we didn't want to take too much of your time, but this is a story that there's a lot of details to. And so I wanted to make sure to present to you some of the work that's been done. What we'd like to do now is to offer an opportunity to, for you to ask questions, because this is, one of the things Pastor Don said the last time we met was we need to make sure people have the opportunity to learn more and to talk to people one-on-one. So the way we'd like this to work is you were handed a couple of cards. And so the first one is a question. And so we have some questions to start with. We have Kelly and Lisa and Cindy around the perimeter to collect your questions. We're going to try to consolidate those. And so these are questions for the panel. These are folks who work in this field, have been looking at this issue and know what we've explored. That will speak as well as we can. If we can't answer your question, what we'll do is we'll follow up with that question, and we're going to post all the Q&A stuff online as well. So we're going to do a question and answer, and I'd like us to end maybe at, like, if possible, at 7:45. We also have, you should have been given, as you came in, a comment card. This is your opportunity to write your comments. If you need more cards, let us know. You can fill in as many as you want. But we have the sites and the full sort of description of the sites on each one of those at the back counter. The first one starts with the Foursquare site, and the last one starts with Hope Source. And so if you want to look closer at those, we'll have staff too that will answer your questions if you have specific questions about the sites. And so please feel free to mull around and ask those. And then on your way out, if you enter through the front door, we have a comment box that you can drop your comments in. So right now we're collecting questions. If you have your comments already, you're welcome to provide those. And we're going to start with some questions for the panel. Thank you.
Is there any more? Yeah. Okay, perfect.
So while they're working on those, I have a couple of questions to start out with. So one question was, how was the site search criteria established? Who'd like to take that? Is that me? It might be me. Okay. And I think I answered that. We basically looked at best practices and what the site requirements, what other communities were doing. And then based on typically, shelters are considered housing, and typically housing isn't in like heavy industrial places. And so the zoning was needed to be appropriate. The surrounding uses needed to be appropriate for where people would sleep at night. We talked about the size and the accessibility as well. So there was a fair amount of thought working very closely with this group and also with our consultants to determine what the site criteria was. Great. Let's see here. Is it possible to have a sleep center operating by November? Okay, I'm gonna answer that. And I would say if everything worked out perfectly, yes. But that means we need a location, and the pallet shelter folks did some work and research with them. They actually have a 60-day period that if you do an order, they can actually come and set up the shelters within 60 days. But again, in order to make sure you have a site with utilities and things like that, there's a few extras. So every day that we wait, we are less able to get a sleep center set up by that. So we are working on a parallel path with our partners to make sure we have some sort of full weather shelter option for start date. Okay, let's see here. Another question, where are unsheltered people currently sleeping or camping? Who would like to take that?
So we have, Hope Source has outreach teams that go out every day and all through the county. And we have what's called a by name list. We know exactly who's where and whether they're still there, whether they have gone. And we work with the Public Works Department too, because they sometimes see people we don't, and we see sometimes people they don't. We cooperate with that to point it out. They are sleeping anywhere that is out of your town. So in the trees, in brushy areas, encampments along the river, a lot of different places, not obvious to the person driving by. You probably wouldn't see them. And I won't tell you exactly the locations that I know for sure, because I don't want you to visit them. That's an intrusion on their lives and their territory, and that's not quite fair. So do we know exactly where some are always in certain places? Sure we do. But if you are just looking for them, luckily you aren't seeing them on the, in your doorways of your businesses. They're finding places where they can be away and to be invisible. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I can also add to that. That they're also sleeping in like the post office. We get a large number of calls on them there. And they're trying to find someplace warm. We will find them sleeping out here in the parking lot. We will find them sleeping outside of churches. Two of the past homeless people that we found deceased in our community, one was found in front of a church and the other one was found in the parking lot here at Howe Homes. So they're sleeping any place they can find a place to sleep. And those that have the background and experience of our community are doing exactly what Susan said. They don't want to sleep in your view. I was born and raised here and they've always slept along the Marion River Trail, in the tree lines. The tree line back behind the pathways where is currently being looked at has been a popular place for years for them to sleep.
I'm the designated questioner. Regarding flow barrier, question drug alcohol use, allowed in sleep center, question mark, retired, requirement to engage with available resources. So you want to talk, does somebody want to talk about the requirements? Brittany, do you want to talk to?
Thank you. So we don't require sobriety to use the sleep center, but we do not allow substances on property. So the police department in Moses Lake has offered a safe disposal container, and that gets used if somebody does something in it they're not supposed to bring. But we don't allow use on site. That's a major violation. That would be an immediate timeout from the sleep center. But we don't police use, we don't require people to engage in treatment or to address the problem. A lot of people that are experiencing homelessness use drugs and alcohol to kind of numb the trauma that comes with that. And we don't want to create barriers for people to have a safe place to sleep. As long as they're not doing it on property, none of your business.
Thank you. So,
Could I add something to that too? Our experience with the cold weather shelter also has to do with the behavior of the folks when they're staying at the center, which would be the same for the sleep center. And so if the drug or alcohol addiction causes them to become unsafe for other people, that also would eliminate them a period of time from being in the shelter.
so does someone want to speak to how do you justify building a low barrier shelter 350 feet from the Happy Feet Academy? Are there other locations?
If you look at the resources I mentioned, you will see many sleep centers that are across the street from or near schools, daycare. What they have done is make sure that the environment of the sleep center is fully secure. So it's fenced, there's lights, there's cameras, there are also no loitering, so you can't just hang about. They've made sure that people can get easily from the center to the downtown or to some other area as opposed to walking through areas. And the incidence of any issues happening to nearby businesses like daycares is infinitesimal. These are homeless people, not people without knowledge of families and children. And they have their own children and they love it. And their thing in life is not to harm children. So if you look at the studies, please do go online, take a look and see what happens if you have sleep centers of any kind in areas that have schools or daycares of any kind, and educate yourself on that.
Thank you, Susan. Don, we want to talk about safety with the cold weather shelter at all, your experience with?
Well, in 7 of the 9 years so far that we've run the cold weather shelter, we have had the churches that have housed or hosted the cold weather shelter. At various times, at least 3 of those churches also had preschool programs in their church at the same time. And so sometimes there was coming and goings as they, not often, because the sleep center or the cold weather shelter at least started at 7 and closed at 7, and most of the daycares didn't start until after that, the preschools and the churches. So there wasn't a lot of things going on. But we just didn't experience any issue in any of the churches that had preschools. And to my knowledge, there haven't been any issues or complaints to any of our churches about any of the area around where the churches are in regard to the population, the homeless population coming and going. That period of time.
Thank you, Don. We have a number of questions related to safety, some version of this. Anybody want to talk about concerns about vulnerable seniors and in interaction or interface with folks experiencing homelessness or sleep center?
I didn't get the question.
Again, safety related to vulnerable populations, similar to what you talked about. We have a number of folks that are concerned about safety of the seniors living near one of the sites as well.
You can also speak to some of that. We take a look at all the crime that occurs throughout our community. And homelessness, it does not equate crime. We haven't had any reports that I'm aware of that would cause some concern. We hear anecdotal information that, we had car prowls in the area. Well, we've got car prowls in the area of everywhere else. So we hear kind of stuff in passing, but any hard crime data, I can tell you with the homeless population, the unsheltered population in our community, the primary crimes that they're committing are trespassing. Because people in the community have grown tired of being on their properties and have called us to come and trespass them from that property. And then when they go back there, then we're to take some type of enforcement action against them. Don't get me wrong, there are some people in the community that are not limited to the homeless that are predatory on our population, but that does not equate to homelessness, does not equate to mental health. There are people that are like that in our community.
I also anecdotally, I think that unhoused individuals are far more often victims of violent crime than they are perpetrators. I also can think of at least 5 cases of senior citizens who are in the sleep center because they are being taken advantage of and have lost security if they're sending money to somebody. I think far too often our unhoused neighbors are victims of the criminals themselves.
You might want to stay here. The question is, who is screening the clients? How do you address weapons and guns? How generally do you screen? Again, we don't have a site up, but based on sort of the Moses site model. And what social services, actually work evenings or that would come to the center?
So for screening, we screen people in the first room. If you ever want to, after we're done, stop by and see a virtual tour of what the Civic Center looks like. We have a screening room. We ask people to hand over their weapons. We do an open bag search. They open it. They show us their belongings. They have weapons. So a lot of times, people don't feel safe being out in the community without knife or something like that. We have a safe on site. They voluntarily hand that over and they can collect it on their way out. What was the second part of the question? Well, social services. So we have relationships with service providers in Grant County, same that we have here, and we do share the burden. So different organizations come on a weekly basis. And then we also offer that 8 to 9 o'clock hour for people to come in and have appointments. So we do realize that overnight is not always the most ideal. But we've also had service providers in the cold weather shelter. Open Door Health Clinic 2 years ago saved somebody's life. So I think that people who work in nonprofits in our communities are good-hearted people, and they're generally willing to be flexible.
I just had a question about why we're sorting cards, and what we're trying to do is put them in files because a lot of folks are asking a variation of the same question. So we're trying to be efficient here tonight and trying to do the questions together so we can use our white space. So the next question is about affordable housing, right? Why in Ellensburg don't we have more affordable housing to help those before they become homeless?
And so that I.
Why don't we in Ellensburg have more affordable housing to help those before they become homeless?
Oh, you're singing my song. Because that's exactly what needs to happen. We know we're behind hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, literally, multiple hundreds. If we started today, we wouldn't be able to put up enough affordable housing to keep up with the rise of rental market costs. The problem is twofold. You have to have dirt before you can build more houses. Hard to find. It needs to be dirt that's close to city or county utilities and stuff. UGAs or in town. That's hard to find. When you finally do buy, in fact, we bought a lot on Pearl Street because it was available and we said they don't make dirt. And we bought it. Nothing going up on that yet, but we will. It's planned for an 8-unit senior veteran project. So when we can find the land and we can afford to purchase the land with the help of the city, county, and then the state and private investors, we're going to do it. But it takes money, it takes dirt. That's the whole, is having enough that we capitalizing on that wherever we find it, we're going to be right on it. We have 4 projects in the works right now. We have one in Cleon, Tiana Court, that will be 40 units of affordable housing with a child care center and a community center. That should be up in 2025 or 26, we hope. We have the Nights Inn project that we think will come on in 25 or 26. That's another 50 units of affordable housing. We have some other projects in the works that we're waiting for closure on that would bring another 50 or 60 units. So we're doing our best. But even at that, as aggressive as we are, we alone cannot resolve the number of units we need. But we're trying, other developers are trying to do just Habitat have 15 houses, I think, going up. 18 going up on water. That's fantastic. They come through our pathway and eventually sometimes they go into housing like that. So yes, it's a problem. Are we attacking it aggressively? Yes, we are. What's the problem? Dirt and money.
I just wanted to add, I learned there's 5 L's that go into the cost of housing. So you have land, and the city has looked for, what excess land do we have? We could donate work to the housing and, the source or the Habitat for Humanity, Stuart Meadows is one of those locations, and there's one on Pine Street. There's also lending, if you think about it. We were building a lot of houses in 2008. I was wondering where are all the people, that are gonna live in these. And then the housing bubble, and builders haven't come back. And this is nationwide. There's labor. There's a shortage of labor for almost everything right now. Lumber, cost of lumber has gone up, and other materials, for vegetables, and I'm gonna forget. But anyway, it's multifaceted. There's not just one problem, and it's not something that the city has control, nor does the state. So, it takes a partnership, with the nonprofits, state, county, government. Everyone's got to be working on this because it is a nationwide.
I've been studying housing conditions in Kittitas County for about 4 years. And I can share just a few brief statistics with you. The most surprising one occurred in July of last year when a national housing company that basically has access to rental unit information in the entire country published their list of the 3 most rapidly rising one-bedroom apartment costs. So let me restate that. Most rental increase in 1 year on a one-bedroom apartment. Number 1 was Las Cruces, New Mexico, 40% rent increase. Number 2 was Corpus Christi, Texas, 38% increase. You know where I'm going here? Number 3 in the nation on 1 year rent increase on a one-bedroom apartment was Ellensburg, Washington, 34% rent increase. That company, by the way, is called Dwellsy with some weird internet spelling, but you can look it up because they continue to make that rental information available. Some other sources that we know about, or some other terrific research comes from the State Department of Commerce. And in March of last year, they published a report that said Kittitas County in the next 20 years needs 5,300 units of affordable housing. And they break it out. 200 units need to be permanent supported housing. 1,000 units need to be 50% rental income or lower. And that brings me to another. Affordable housing is done on a statistic called area median income, or AMI. You'll hear people talk a lot about that. We get that number from the federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And HUD just recently changed the AMI for Kittitas County. And you may be surprised to know that HUD thinks the average family income in Kittitas County is $99,800. Yes, my reaction to my only theory on that is some Cadius use the numbers and Seattle Tech jobs use the numbers for us. I believe as we move east towards the Columbia River, I believe those numbers go down a little. However, I'd like you guys to think about that. In order to be eligible for affordable housing at the 50% level, 50% is $45,800. So when we talk about putting people in affordable housing, that's not homeless people. That's someone, that's a manager at Fred Meyer. That's a first year school teacher. I know because I was a school teacher and that's what I made. So just remember a few special things about that. A few other local conditions that we have seen are that there are a lot of homes held in Kittitas County which have been purchased as investment vehicles and are rented to college students. They are effectively not in the market. And finally, nationwide, we have seen housing being purchased by corporations for monetary gain, and that often removes them from the market. Just a few factors about affordable housing in Kittitas County that I've come across over the last 4 years.
Thank you, David.
Can I add just one point, because I operate homeless programs across 8 counties in central Washington, and it's bleak, it is. But in Kittitas County, we are very progressive and aggressive in affordable housing. Between 900 units of Hope Sources property, Crestview, there's several subsidized units with the housing authority. If I look at my easiest rental market, it is clearly Kittitas County, and it's still really dang hard to get housing.
Heidi, do you remember mine? I'll beg your time for just a few minutes, because affordable housing, I'll take your credit where credit's due in this, because there's a lot of people trying to add to affordable housing. But to build affordable housing, it requires a tremendous number of partners. Federal appropriations from your senators and Senator Cantwell and Murray and Representative Tim Schreier have all gotten appropriations for some of the building that goes on in this county. And that's amazing. Frank Chop did the same thing. But you also need private investors. And so you end up building a stack of money. Private investors, government money, etc. But you can't get any of that if your local community does not put some skin in the game. And your city and your county have stepped up to the plate every single time and committed substantial foundational money. Get the points to get all of the rest of it. So I just wanted you to know they're stepping up. They are doing everything they can to support those of us. And there are more than just Hope Source that are believing option.
Great. So another question, once we have these, is the city going to enforce camping ordinances? Or are we going to go back to?
So right now, both the city and I think the county have similar ordinances regulating camping. And they do prohibit camping on public property, but only so far as there is shelter space available. So when the cold weather shelter is operating from mid-November to mid-March, it can be enforced. During the rest of the year, ordinance would not allow enforcement of the anti-camping ordinance. Would not allow enforcement because there is no shelter available. So that's the current status. If a year-round overnight sleep center is built, then yes, we could certainly enforce the camping ordinance. It's another issue about what to do about that. I don't know if Chief Blake wants to speak to that, but there are some people certainly who do not want to stay in a shelter, or they, for whatever reason, can't. So that's a different issue, but we do have the ability to enforce that ordinance if we have a year-round sleep center.
And I'll keep my comments really short. The enforcement will take place if they're not locked. So if we contact individuals and give them the opportunity to pick up their stuff and move along and gain compliance from them, we're not going to take any. But if they decide that they don't want to comply or they're repeat customers of ours, then enforcement is certainly an option available. But keep in mind, the enforcement initially is going to be a citation
they're not going to jail. So jail was not going to be providing them a home. But yes, that's no different than any of our other enforcement options. We always seek to gain compliance first.
Thank you. Next question, what has been the success rate of homeless using the cold weather shelter, any jobs and housing?
I don't know the real statistics on that. I have anecdotal information that says every year that we run the cold weather shelter, by the time the shelter's over with, there's a number of them that have been housed in one fashion or another. Hope Source has been very good at working with us with the cold weather shelter in order to get people. And so that's why our numbers, at least the folks coming to the cold weather shelter, sort of remained somewhere in the mid-teens. Because a bunch of them get housed and then there are a few more that show up next year. So our numbers are remaining pretty level, but a bunch of them are being housed.
Next question, we moved from Seattle to get away from criminal activity directly linked to homelessness. And Ellensburg is now trying to replicate the same failed programs. Why will this be any different?
That sounds like that was for me. I can tell you that there's no comparison in the metropolitan area like Seattle or the greater King County area with a community like Ellensburg. I've been in law enforcement for 36 years and I've served all over the state of Washington and from large metropolitan areas to my home here. And you're dealing with the different demographics, you're dealing with different dynamics and economies. So to make the association between King County and Kittitas County is no comparison. I can tell you as far as crime related in Kittitas County, dealing with the homeless, like I stated earlier, the main problem is with them being trespassed and chased around. I can tell you that Kittitas County does have a crime problem, as most communities do these days with property crimes and other violent crimes and drugs, but it has nothing to do with homeless or nothing to do with low-income housing. It has a lot to do with the criminal justice system and kind of the disrepair it's in.
Thank you, Jen. So, questions about cost. So how much will this cost the taxpayers?
I mean, that's gonna be dependent on site selection. So as you all saw, thank you for going through those sites, it has a heavy part of this conversation that everyone needs to consider. I know that a lot of people have a lot of passionate opinions, and rightfully so, and should, to express the locations that you think this should go, and a lot of you have a lot of passions about where it should not. You consider those options about where it should not go, where it should go. The cost of this has to be considered. It's going to be one of those factors that the city council will have to deal with, that us and the community will have to. So take that into consideration whenever you're talking about these locations. It's something that I know that I'm concerned about. Else is going to be concerned about. How does it get passed on? It's not something that we're willing to put the city budget for. It's something that we have to address. So there is a balance of what makes sense financially that has to be sustainable, that we can actually fund this.
I like to look at real world examples. And the closest comparison we have, which has been made over and over again tonight, is the Moses Lake Sleep Center. I'm going to give some rough numbers, and I'm sure we could refine them. But the thing that stuck in my mind when I toured the Moses Lake Sleep Center 2 years ago with this group was, and you've seen the picture of it, they told us approximately, this will give you a ballpark number, it took about $400,000 to build, and it runs for about $20,000 a month. Just invite you to think that there's been significant inflation in our country in the last 2 years, but that might give you a first first look in your brain at what something like this would cost. And the Moses Lake Sleep Center is almost the lowest method for us to do that. If we bought these pallet shelters, it would be a little more expensive than buying the tough sheds that Moses Lake bought. But we can learn from their experience because tough sheds from Home Depot are not designed for human habitation. So multiple years of people sleeping overnight and their breath coming out has rotted the wood in those tough sheds, which is why we have the chance to do things a little smarter here and go with a company that's going to build individual shelters, but designed from the beginning for human habitation and for repair and replacement on a standardized system.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Alda. Let's see here. We are coming to the end. We want to try to do one more question and then a break. So we're going to do this. There are a lot of questions here. A lot of them have to do with safety and cost, and then also compared to like what does this do to our community? One of the common things that comes up is, you know, we don't want to be Yakima. Does anyone want to speak to how this will be different than Yakima?
If you're talking about First Street in Yakima, where the Union Gospel Mission is, it's a 24-hour day shelter. So people come and they stay. And then they leave the shelter and they wander around and they come back and, you know, what we're proposing is a sleep center where they're there at night, but they're not there during the day. So they don't live. That makes a huge difference on who then is hanging around the shelter all day long. They don't go right. And here, they would be at the shelter all day long. They would move along.
And thanks, Don. I just wanted to add to that. Well, I actually spoke with the Yakima City Attorney last week, and, you know, the Union Gospel Mission is not the city's shelter. The city shelter is Camp Hope, which they've been running in for a couple of years. And it's run by one of the local religious organizations. It's on property that the city owns and is leased out to this organization with some operating conditions for it. And they've got Army-style barracks, and it is a full 24/7 shelter, but it's located not on First Avenue. So I think there's some confusion about whose shelter it is on First Avenue and what exactly they're doing to run it.
I also want to add to that. When I first started at Hope Source, Susan told me something that resonated with me to this day, is that if you respect somebody, you expect something out of them. And I have seen that countless times. We have expectations for our guests. I think we emulated also at the cold weather shelter, that you are a member of our community when you're at the sleep center. You have expectation to your neighbor. You have expectation to keep the property clean and follow the rules and respect the community, because that's how we get to keep the sleep center. And I've seen our guests time and time again rise to, right? They clean up the perimeter. We don't clean up the perimeter. They generally police each other. If someone's acting out of line, and I think Don can probably vouch for this, and say, is usually the people that will jump in are the guests at the sleep center and tell them, hey, knock it off. We're gonna lose this. And I think that that's really where it comes out of. If you have rules and expectations, people rise to, and we've seen it.
And one more thing, and then I'll shut up. It started 9 years ago when I started the cold weather shelter. I chose to call them guests because I wanted them to feel like they were guests in our churches. And when you stay someplace as a guest, different than if you're just a client or customer, you know. So the idea, as soon as we start treating them, they feel like they are guests in our home or guests at a shelter or guests in our churches, they kind of act differently. That begins the respect process.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Again, what we're going to do is post this information online, and try to get your questions answered. These people up here will be around, and again, you have sites at the back of the room. Please fill out your comment cards and drop it on your way out or hand it to one of the staff. We will actually compile those. Those will go to the city council and to the county commissioners for their meeting on June 13th. It's going to be at the Armory. And so, and then I would recommend, if you have questions, burning questions, talk to people. We have Hope Source here. Talk to these folks tonight. Ask your questions directly, get an answer. If you don't get an answer, call my office and we'll get you an answer. So, anyway, I don't know, Nancy and Brett, if you want to say something in closing remarks.
I guess I want to say, these folks are the experts. They deal with the population way more frequently than I do. I learn so much from them. It's going to be the 7 council members and 3 commissioners who make this decision. And so what you could do to help us is to provide your comments and concerns, and let us know how you're feeling about it. The questions I'm asking myself are, what makes the community more safe? Having a sleep center or not? What's the impact on the neighborhood where a sleep center would be located? Can that impact be mitigated by operation rules? So which location makes the most sense for those who are using it and for the neighborhood? So there might be a difference. And so just, we welcome your comments. And just saying no isn't as helpful to us if you say no because, or even more helpful would be, yes, this is the best type because. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just, well, I'm the new guy to the group, so I appreciate the, and being a part of this and helping inform myself. Just because we're elected to office doesn't mean that we know any better than anyone else. So I appreciate the questions and the feedback and the interaction we've had tonight. I think it was a very good discussion, and hopefully people got their questions answered, sorry. And I'll just say, my wife and I we chose to live here because we love this community. We're raising 2 girls that are going to public schools here, and by no means do we ever want to make a decision as elected officials that would negatively impact this community. So I just want to say thank you again for coming out and being involved.
On that note, I'd also say, there have been opportunities to speak with your city council, with, coffee with council. If you have some of those opportunities to sit down with us, we've had some very good discussion on a lot of things, not just this, but the involvement that you have here in our community about these things are really important. I encourage you to have that same participation in any city council and all of the subcommittees that serve both the city and county. We need your help as far as serving this population, so help us out with that.